There is a card in the tarot deck that shows a naked figure kneeling by water under a sky of stars, pouring two streams, one onto the earth, one back into the pool, utterly vulnerable, utterly open, restored to a condition before shame, before striving, before the fallen world taught us to hide. And there is a teaching Neville Goddard gave in the 1940s about Eden, not as a garden lost in history, but as a state of consciousness you occupy right now when you dare to assume before the world confirms it. A state of pure being. A state before the labor of justification. A state in which imagination simply is, and the outer world drinks from it without negotiation. The star card is called the card of hope restored. Neville called Eden the imagination, unconditioned by fact. What if they are the same thing? What if the soul's return to innocence and the law of assumption are not two teachings, but one truth told twice? Once in images on parchment, once in the voice of a mystic who stood on stages in Los Angeles and New York and said, "I tell you, you are already the thing you desire to be." And what if someone like you, used this exact convergence to create a real transformation in the outer world? This is that story. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe. This is a space where we take Neville's teaching, the law of assumption, the primacy of imagination, the doctrine that consciousness is the only reality, and trace its echo across the esoteric traditions of the world. Not to dilute Neville, but to recognize him. Not to make him less specific, but to see how specific truths become universal when they touch the root. Today, we're going to explore one of the most beautiful and least understood convergences I have encountered in this work. The relationship between Neville's teaching on Eden as a state of consciousness and the star card in the tarot. That luminous image of the soul returned to innocence, pouring itself out in trust, standing naked before the cosmos without defense or pretense. We're going to walk through what Neville actually taught about this Edenic state, how the star card maps to it symbol by symbol, and then, most importantly, we're going to examine a real case study, a living testimony from someone who used this teaching, consciously or unconsciously, to manifest a specific, tangible result. By the end of this episode, you will understand why the star is not a card of distant hope, but a card of present assumption. You will see why Neville's Eden is not a place you return to, but a consciousness you occupy the moment you stop negotiating with the outer world and simply dare to be. And if this exploration lands for you, if it opens something, clarifies something, or simply reminds you of what you already know in your bones, then a like or a subscription keeps this work alive. I am grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. Truly. Let's continue. Let me take you into a teaching Neville gave in the mid-1940s, during the years when his voice was still being forged, when his language had not yet settled into the streamlined clarity of his later work. In those years, he spoke often of Eden. Not Eden as a historical garden, not Eden as a myth of disobedience and exile. Eden as a state of consciousness. He said, and I am paraphrasing across multiple lectures because he returned to this image again and again, that Eden is the state in which you perish before you have labored to become. It is the state in which imagination has not yet been conditioned by the facts of the world. It is the consciousness that assumes its desire fulfilled without requiring proof, without demanding a bridge of incidents, without needing to understand how. In Eden, you simply are what you imagine yourself to be, and the world drinks from that state and reflects it back. Neville taught that the fall from Eden is not a historical event, but a psychological one. It happens the moment you believe the outer world is more real than your inner state. The moment you say, yes, I imagined it, but look, the world says otherwise. The moment you let the serpent, which is doubt, which is the evidence of the senses, persuade you that you are not what you have assumed yourself to be. The fall is the move from I ams to I will try to become. And the return to Eden? That is not a future event. That is the move back from effort to being, from becoming to EHIMSS. Neville said, the world is yourself pushed out. He said, Consciousness is the only reality. He said, dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and the world will reshape itself to reflect that assumption. But in his earlier teachings, he framed this in mythic, biblical language. He said, you are standing in Eden right now, or you are standing east of Eden, laboring in the sweat of your brow, depending entirely on whether you are resting in the assumption or striving to make it true. Now let me ground this in something concrete, because Neville never let a principle remain abstract. He would always say, try it, test it. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to prove me wrong. Imagine a woman who desires a committed relationship. She is single. The outer facts say she is alone. The world of Caesar, the world of appearances, confirms her singleness every morning when she wakes. If she lives east of Eden, she will labor for the relationship. She will swipe, she will network, she will improve herself, she will strategize. She will do all of this from the feeling of lack, from the state of not yet having and every action will be colored by that state. The world will reflect it. She will meet unavailable people, or no one at all, or she will meet someone and subtly repel them because her consciousness is still broadcasting, I am trying to become loved. But as she returns to Eden, if she dares to assume the state of being loved, being cherished, being in the relationship now, in imagination, then she does nothing from the outside. She does not labor. She does not justify. She simply is the woman in the loving relationship, and she feels it. She falls asleep in that feeling. She walks through her day from that state. She has returned to the garden. She is no longer becoming, she is being. And from that state, the world reshapes itself. The bridge of incidents unfolds. The outer facts yield to the inner state, because consciousness is the only reality, and the world is yourself pushed out. Neville taught this again and again. He said that assumption, though false to the outer eye, hardens into fact if you persist in it. He said that imagination is not a tool you use to get things. Imagination is the creative power of God in you, and when you occupy a state in imagination, you are occupying it in the only reality there is. Eden is that place of unconditioned imagination. It is the consciousness that assumes before it sees. It is the state in which you are no longer negotiating with the outer world, no longer justifying, no longer laboring to prove your assumption. You are simply resting in Ida. And that rest, that Sabbath of the soul, is what Neville called the secret of all creation. Now hold that teaching, hold it clearly, because we are about to see it reflected in a system of images centuries older than Neville, and when you see the convergence, you will understand why the star card is not about waiting, it is about being. The star is the 17th card of the major arcana in the tarot. It appears immediately after the tower, the card of collapse, of structures falling, of everything you thought was solid revealed as unstable. And what comes after collapse? Not rebuilding, not strategizing, not a return to the old labor. What comes is nakedness, vulnerability. A figure kneeling by water, unclothed, pouring streams from two vessels, one onto the earth, one back into the pool. Above her, a single bright star surrounded by 7 smaller stars. The sky is clear. There is no storm. There is no striving. There is only trust. The figure is not ashamed of her nakedness. She is not hiding. She is not defending. She has returned to a state before the need for armor, before the need to prove herself, before the need to become anything. She simply is. In the language of tarot, the star is the card of hope restored, but not hope as a future wish, hope as a present knowing, hope as the soul's recognition that it is already connected to the source, already whole, already pouring itself into manifestation without effort. Let me go deeper. The nakedness of the star figure is not incidental, it is central. In the tarot, clothing represents persona, role, the constructed self. To be naked is to be without pretense, without the need to perform, without the masks we wear to negotiate with the world. Neville said the same thing in different words. He said, "You must die to who you were to live as who you wish to be." He said, "Drop the former state completely. Do not take it with you into the new assumption." The star's nakedness is that death. It is the shedding of the old identity, the old justifications, the old stories. It is the return to the unconditioned self. Now look at the water. The figure pours one stream onto the earth and one back into the pool. The tarot scholars will tell you, this represents the flow between conscious and unconscious, between spirit and matter, between the inner and the outer. And they are right. But in Neville's language, this is the movement of assumption into manifestation. You assume the state in imagination. That is, the water poured back into the pool, into the unseen source. And from that assumption, the outer world drinks. That is, the water poured onto the earth. The inner state feeds the outer world. The world is yourself pushed out. The star figure is not laboring to make the water flow. She is not struggling to convince the earth to drink. She is simply pouring, in trust, in rest, in the knowledge that the flow is natural, that imagination and manifestation are not two things, but one movement. This is Eden. This is the state before the fall. This is the consciousness that does not negotiate with the outer facts because it knows. It knows. It knows. That consciousness is the only reality. And the stars above her? In tarot, the stars represent divine order, cosmic law, the invisible structure that governs all manifestation. The single bright star is often interpreted as the soul's true identity, the I Am, the divine selfhood. The 7 smaller stars are the sevenfold creative power, the chakras, the planetary forces, the days of creation. Neville would have called that single bright star awareness of being the I Am, the consciousness that exists before all assumption, the foundation from which all states arise. And the 7 smaller stars, those are the states you assume, the versions of yourself you occupy, the garments of consciousness you wear, knowing they are garments, knowing you are not bound to any of them. The star card says, you are not your circumstances, you are not your history, you are not the facts of the outer world. You are the naked awareness that assumes, and the world drinks from your assumption and reflects it back. Neville said it this way, you are not what you think you are what you think. The star card teaches the same truth in images. Now, let me bring this home to the title of this episode, because someone, a real person, understood this teaching and used it to create a tangible transformation. The star card is often pulled in readings when someone is in a place of vulnerability, when the old structures have fallen and there is no clear path forward. The reader will say, the star is hope, the star is renewal, trust the process. And that is true as far as it goes. But what if you went deeper? What if you understood that the star is not telling you to wait for hope? It is telling you to be the unconditioned consciousness that pours itself into the world without defense, without negotiation, without labor. What if you understood that the star is Eden, and Eden is not a place you return to? It is a state you occupy the moment you stop justifying your assumption and simply rest in it. That is what this person did. And the result was not mystical in the vague sense. It was specific. It was tangible. It was the manifestation of a desired state that had seemed, by all outer evidence, impossible. We're going to walk through that story in the next section. But first, I want you to feel the depth of this convergence. The star card and Neville's teaching on Eden are not two ideas running parallel. They are the same idea, the same truth, the same instruction. Stop laboring, stop justifying, stop negotiating with the outer world. Return to the naked awareness that assumes its desire fulfilled, and pour that assumption into the world with trust, with rest, with the knowledge that consciousness is the only reality, and the world is yourself pushed out. That is the star. That is Eden. That is the law. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah is not her real name, but her story is real, and she gave permission for it to be shared here because, in her words, someone needs to know this actually works. Sarah had been studying Neville for about 2 years. She understood the law intellectually. She had read, Feeling is the secret. She had listened to the lectures. She had done SATs exercises. She had small successes. A text from a friend, a parking space, a check in the mail. But there was one area of her life that felt utterly stuck, her career. She was working in a corporate job that drained her. She wanted to transition into creative work, into writing and teaching, but every time she tried to assume the state of being a successful creative professional, she would hit a wall. The outer facts were overwhelming. She had bills, she had responsibilities, she had no clear path from where she was to where she wanted to be. She was laboring, she was striving, she was east of Eden. One evening she was sitting with her tarot deck, not for fortune-telling, but as a meditation tool, something she had done for years before she ever encountered Neville. She pulled a single card, asking, "What do I need to understand right now?" She pulled the star, and she stared at it. She had pulled this card before. She knew the traditional meanings: hope, renewal, trust. But that night something clicked. She saw the nakedness of the figure and thought, I am still wearing my old identity. I am still defending my reasons for why I can't transition yet. I am still clothed in justification. She saw the water being poured and thought, I am trying to make the outer world shift before I fully assume the inner state. I am pouring conditionally. I am not resting in the assumption. I am negotiating with it. She saw the stars above and thought, I keep forgetting that I am the awareness, not the circumstance. I am the single star, the I am. The rest is just states I assume. And in that moment, she understood what Neville had been saying all along. She did not need to figure out the bridge of incidents. She did not need to justify the transition. She did not need to wait for permission from the outer world. She needed to return to Eden, to the unconditioned state, to the naked assumption. That night, she went into SATs differently than she ever had before. She did not visualize a scene of success in the future. She did not imagine getting a book deal or launching a course or quitting her job. She imagined herself as the star figure. She imagined herself kneeling by water, completely naked, completely vulnerable, completely at rest. She felt the warm night air on her skin. She felt the cool water flowing from her hands. She felt no shame, no hurry, no need to prove anything. And in that state, she whispered to herself, I am a writer. I am a teacher. I am already this. The world drinks from this state, and I am pouring freely. She did not imagine becoming these things. She imagined being them, in that moment, in the garden, in the place before justification. She fell asleep in that state. She did it again the next night, and the next, not as a technique, not as a method to get something, but as a return, a Sabbath, a rest. Within 3 weeks, the outer world began to shift. A former colleague reached out, asking if she would be interested in freelance writing work. The pay was better than her corporate salary. She said yes. A week later, an opportunity to co-teach an online workshop appeared, something she had never pursued, but it came to her. Within 2 months, she had enough income from creative work to give notice at her corporate job. She did not force it. She did not strategize it. She did not labor for it in the old way. She returned to Eden. She assumed the state. She rested in it. And the world, being herself pushed out, reflected it back. Now, let me be clear. Sarah did not sit passively and wait. She responded to opportunities. She said yes to invitations. She took action. But the action came from the state, not to create the state. She was no longer acting from lack, from striving, from the need to become. She was acting from being, from overflow, from rest. That is the difference between laboring east of Eden and living in the garden. And that is what the star card taught her, because the star card is not separate from Neville's teaching. It is a visual map of the same law. Let me give you the practice, step by step, the way Sarah did it, so you can try it yourself. Tonight, or whenever you go into SATs, do not visualize a future scene. Do not imagine getting the thing you desire. Instead, imagine yourself as the figure in the star card. See yourself kneeling by water. Feel the warmth of the night, the coolness of the water. Feel yourself completely unclothed, not in a physical sense, but in the sense that you are not wearing the old identity, the old justifications, the old reasons why you cannot yet be what you wish to be. You are naked, vulnerable, open, at rest, and from that place whisper your assumption, not as a future hope, as a present fact. I am loved. I am abundant. I am the writer. I am free. Feel yourself pouring that assumption into the world. One stream into the pool of the unconscious, one stream onto the earth of manifestation. Do not force the flow. Do not strain. Simply pour in trust. And then rest. Sleep in that state. Let the world drink from it. Do this for a week, for 2 weeks, for as long as it takes for the state to feel natural, for the assumption to feel like rest rather than effort, and watch what happens. Not because the star card has magic, not because tarot controls reality, but because you have returned to Eden. You have stopped negotiating with the outer world and started resting in the inner state. You have become the unconditioned consciousness that Neville spoke of, and the world, being yourself pushed out, has no choice but to reflect it. Try it. I tell you, try it. Try it. Here is what strikes me most powerfully about this convergence between the star card and Neville's teaching on Eden. They emerged from completely different traditions. The tarot's roots are tangled. Some scholars trace it to medieval Europe, others to Kabbalah, others to Egyptian mystery schools. Neville's teaching grew out of his study of the Bible, his time with Abdullah, his own mystical visions. And yet they arrive at the same place. They both say, the soul's true power is not in striving, but in being. Not in justification, but in assumption. Not in negotiating with the outer world, but in resting in the inner state and letting the outer world drink from it. Why does this keep happening? Why do traditions separated by centuries, by continents, by entirely different symbolic languages keep arriving at the same truth? Because consciousness is the only reality. Because the law is not Neville's invention. It is not the tarot's invention. It is not a teaching that belongs to any single system. It is the structure of reality itself. When you go deep enough into any authentic mystical tradition, whether it is Christian mysticism, Kabbalah, Vedanta, Hermeticism, the tarot, the teachings of the Stoics, the insights of quantum theory, you find the same principle waiting for you, dressed in different language but unmistakable in its core. You are not the body. You are not the circumstances. You are the awareness that assumes, and the world you experience is the reflection of that assumption. Neville said it clearly. Consciousness is the only reality. The star card says it in images, the naked soul pouring itself into the world, undefended, unconditioned, at rest. The mystics of every age have said it in their own way. You are not separate from the divine. You are not outside the garden. You are not waiting for permission to be whole. You are already whole. You are already in Eden. The return is not a journey across space or time. It is a shift in consciousness, a release of the need to justify, a willingness to simply be what you imagine yourself to be. And when you make that shift, when you occupy that state, the world has no choice but to conform, not because you are bending reality to your will, but because reality is consciousness, and consciousness is what you are. This is why the convergence matters. It tells you that you are not reading one man's philosophy. You are not exploring one esoteric system. You are encountering a truth so fundamental, so woven into the fabric of existence that it emerges again and again in every culture, in every century, in every language. And it is not a truth you need to earn. It is not a secret kept from you. It is the truth you are living right now, whether you know it or not. The only question is, will you live it consciously? Will you return to Eden, to the star, to the unconditioned state of pure being? Or will you continue laboring east of the garden, trying to become what you already are? You clicked on this episode because someone, maybe you, maybe someone you heard about, said, "I used the star card to manifest this," and you wanted to know if it was real. It is real. Not because the star card has power over reality, but because the star card is a map of a state of consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. When you return to that state, the state of unconditioned being, of nakedness before the cosmos, of pouring yourself into the world without defense or negotiation, the world drinks from that state and reflects it back. That is not magic. That is law. Neville knew it. The mystics who created the tarot knew it. And now you know it. If this exploration has opened something for you, if it has clarified or deepened your understanding, then a like or a subscription keeps this work alive. And I am grateful, truly, for every person who walks this path with us. Tonight, when you close your eyes, do not imagine the future. Imagine Eden. Imagine yourself as the star, naked, vulnerable, at rest, pouring your assumption into the world without effort, without justification, without fear. You are not laboring to become, you are simply being, and the world is reshaping itself around that state even now. The garden is not behind you. It is here. You are standing in it the moment you stop negotiating and start assuming. And from that place, all things are already yours, because consciousness is the only reality, and you are that consciousness, awake and aware and free. Rest in that tonight. Fall asleep in that state. Let the world drink from it. And in the morning, you will wake in a world that reflects what you poured, not because you worked for it, but because you dared to be it. That is the star. That is Eden. That is the law. And it has always been yours.